52 years. That's how long the greatest horses in the world have been trying to beat records set by one single horse in 1973. And they're still failing.
Look, I know what you're thinking. Old horse racing records? Why should I care? But here's the thing. These aren't just old records. These are records that the best horses in the world have been actively trying to break for over half a century. Secretariat didn't just set records. He set records that make you question if we're even talking about the same sport. Records that make modern trainers look at the numbers and say, that can't be right. This is a horse that ran faster at the end of races than the beginning, that won by distances so massive the second-place horse wasn't even on camera. So we're counting down the top 10 records Secretariat still holds. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you're going to understand why some people think he wasn't just the greatest racehorse ever. He might have been a one-time glitch in evolution that we'll never see again.
Let's kick this off with a record that sounds super specific, but here's why it matters. In September 1973, Secretariat ran 1 1/8 miles on dirt at Belmont in 1:46 2/5 seconds during the Marlborough Cup. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just one random distance at one track, but this is actually one of the most common race distances in thoroughbred racing. Horses run this distance all the time at Belmont. It's a standard stakes distance, and in over 50 years, with literally thousands of attempts by some of the greatest horses ever bred, nobody has run it faster. Not even close. The nearest anyone's gotten is still about a second behind, which in horse racing terms is like, it's not even a competition. A second in horse racing is massive. That's roughly 5 to 6 lengths at this distance. Think about that. Every top thoroughbred that's raced at Belmont Park since 1973, American Pharoah, Justify, all the Kentucky Derby winners, all the champion horses, they've all tried this distance, and they all ran slower than a horse from the Nixon administration. The Marlborough Cup itself was a fascinating race. This was September 1973, just 2 months after Secretariat had won the Triple Crown. He was facing older horses for the first time, horses that were 4 and 5 years old, fully mature, at their physical peak. In horse racing, that's a massive disadvantage for a 3-year-old. It's like a college football team playing against NFL veterans. The race included Riva Ridge, who had won the Kentucky Derby and Belmont Stakes the year before. This wasn't some weak field. These were champions. And Secretariat didn't just beat them, he demolished them, setting a track record that still stands today. What makes this record even more impressive is the track itself. Belmont Park's dirt track is known for being deep and tiring. It's not a speed-favoring surface like some tracks. Horses have to work harder to run fast times there. Yet somehow, over 5 decades of racing, with advances in track maintenance that have made surfaces faster, no horse has matched what Secretariat did on a September afternoon in 1973. Modern horses get custom-designed training programs. They have sports nutritionists, they have biomechanics experts analyzing every stride. They race on surfaces that are specifically engineered for speed. And they still can't touch 1:46 2/5 for this distance at this track. But that's not even the craziest part. Let's talk about something visual, something you can actually picture. Picture this. You're watching a horse race, and the horse in first place crosses the finish line. You start celebrating, right? Except the second-place horse isn't even on your TV screen yet. That's what happened in the 1973 Belmont Stakes. Secretariat won by 31 lengths. 31. That's roughly 80 feet, about 8 car lengths or 2 school buses parked end to end. The horse in second place was Twice a Prince, and he was so far behind that when Secretariat crossed the wire, Twice a Prince was still in the middle of the final turn. Announcer Chick Anderson had to estimate the margin because he literally couldn't see both horses at the same time. It's like watching Usain Bolt finish the 100 meters, walk off the track, sign an autograph, grab a water bottle, and then the second place guy crosses the line. It's absurd. It's not a race at that point, it's a parade. And before you think, well, maybe the competition was weak, let me tell you about Sham. Sham was the horse that finished last in that race, dead last. And Sham wasn't some nobody, he was a legitimate superstar who would have dominated in almost any other era. Sham had won multiple stakes races. He'd beaten every other horse of his generation except one. In the Kentucky Derby, he ran the second fastest Derby time in history up to that point and finished second to Secretariat. In the Preakness, same thing, posted a time that would have won almost any other Preakness in history and finished second to Secretariat. Sham's jockey, Laffit Pinkeye Jr., said after the Belmont that Sham ran his heart out, ran the race of his life, and still got destroyed. The horse literally broke down after the race. He developed an illness and never raced again. Some people say racing against Secretariat broke him mentally and physically. The other horses in that Belmont, My Gallant had won major stakes races. Twice a Prince was a legitimate contender. These weren't slouches. This was a full field of quality horses, and Secretariat made them look like they were standing still. To put this in perspective, the second largest margin of victory in Belmont Stakes history is about 25 lengths, set by a horse named Count Fleet in 1943. Secretariat beat that by 6 lengths. The average Belmont margin of victory is about 2 to 4 lengths. Secretariat's 31-length victory is so far outside the normal range, it doesn't even compute. Imagine if an NBA team won a playoff game by 100 points. Imagine if a soccer team won 15-0 in the World Cup final. That's the level of dominance we're talking about here. Now let's talk about the Preakness Stakes, the second jewel of the Triple Crown. Secretariat ran the 1 13/16 miles at Pimlico in 1:53 flat. That's still the track record. Every single year since 1973, the best 3-year-olds in the world show up to this race. Same track, same distance, same time of year. It's the exact same race, run under the exact same conditions, and every single year, they all run slower than a horse from 1973. American Pharoah came close in 2015. He ran 1:58. Justify in 2018, 1:55 and 4/5. They're not even in the same ballpark. And here's the kicker. Secretariat was third at the halfway point of that race. He just decided to wake up in the final turn and blow past everyone. There's also a fascinating backstory here. For 39 years, the official time was listed as 1:55, not 1:53. Why? The electronic timer malfunctioned. It wasn't until 2012 when the Maryland Racing Commission reviewed video footage and hand-timed recordings that they officially changed the record to 1:53. So Secretariat's record was even more impressive than people thought for 4 decades. But let's talk about what actually happened during that race, because it's one of the most controversial moments in Triple Crown history. Going into the Preakness, Secretariat had already won the Kentucky Derby in record time. Everyone expected him to dominate, but at the halfway point, he was running in 3rd place behind Sham and another horse. The crowd was getting nervous. Some people thought maybe the Derby had taken too much out of him. Then, on the final turn, jockey Ron Turcotte made his move. Secretariat switched leads and just exploded. We're talking about acceleration that shouldn't be possible for a horse that's already run more than half a mile at race pace. He blew past Sham like Sham was standing still and won by 2.5 lengths. But here's where it gets controversial. The official result board initially showed Secretariat finishing in 1:55. The crowd was confused because that seemed slow. Meanwhile, 2 official timers, both using stopwatches, recorded 1:53 2/5 and 1:54. The electronic timer had malfunctioned. For nearly 4 decades, the official record stood at 1:55, which was still a track record, but not the monster time that people who were there knew they had witnessed. Finally, in 2012, after years of analysis and debate, the Maryland Racing Commission looked at all the evidence, the hand times, the video footage, the electronic backup systems, and officially changed the record to 1:53. Think about what that means. Secretariat's Preakness record was so fast that even the racing officials didn't believe it at first. The timer literally couldn't handle it. And in the 50-plus years since, with annual attempts by the best horses in the world, nobody has come within 2 seconds of that time. That's not just a record, that's a different dimension of speed.
All right, here's the big one. The record everyone knows about. The 1973 Belmont Stakes, 1.5 miles, also called the Test of Champions, because it's the longest of the Triple Crown races. Most horses are gassed by the final quarter mile. Their lungs are burning, their muscles are screaming. Lactic acid is building up. They have to slow down. It's basic physiology. Secretariat ran it in 2:24, not 2:24 and change, not 2:24 point something, 2:24 flat. Not only did he win by those 31 lengths we talked about, but he did it while running each quarter mile faster than the one before. Let me say that again, because it should be impossible. Each quarter mile was faster than the previous one. That's like running a marathon and sprinting the last mile. He wasn't just faster than the other horses, he was accelerating while they were dying. The average Belmont Stakes time is around 2:28 to 2:30. Secretariat's time is still the fastest anyone has ever run 1.5 miles on a dirt track in America. Period. American Pharoah, who many considered the closest modern comparison, ran 2:26.65 in 2015, still more than 2.5 seconds slower. In a race that lasts less than 2.5 minutes, that's an eternity. Chick Anderson's call captures it perfectly. Secretariat is moving like a tremendous machine. Because that's what he was, a biological machine that shouldn't have been possible. Let me paint the full picture of this race, because it's genuinely one of the most remarkable athletic performances in any sport, ever. Secretariat was going for the Triple Crown, something that hadn't been done in 25 years. The last Triple Crown winner was Citation in 1948. An entire generation had grown up never seeing it happen. The pressure was enormous. 70,000 people packed Belmont Park. Millions more watched on TV. The race started and Secretariat immediately went to the front. This wasn't the plan. Usually, Ron Turcotte would rate him, hold him back, save energy. But Secretariat had other ideas. He took the lead and just kept going. By the half-mile mark, he was already pulling away. By the three-quarter pole, it wasn't a race anymore. Sham, the only horse who could ever compete with Secretariat, was dying. His jockey was whipping him, urging him on, and Sham just had nothing left. He would finish last. Then something crazy happened. Instead of Secretariat slowing down in the stretch like every other horse in history, he accelerated. The margin kept growing. 10 lengths, 15 lengths, and 20 lengths. The crowd went absolutely insane. When Secretariat crossed the finish line, the camera had to zoom out because Twice a Prince, in second place, literally wasn't in the shot. The timer showed 2:24, and the crowd erupted. People were crying. Grown men were openly weeping. They had just witnessed something that transcended sports. CBS announcer Chick Anderson, who had called thousands of races in his career, completely abandoned his professional composure. His voice cracked with emotion. He shouted, "Secretariat is widening now. He is moving like a tremendous machine." After the race, Ron Turcotte said he never asked Secretariat for anything. He just let the horse run, and Secretariat showed the world what was possible. Here's what makes this record truly untouchable. It's not just fast, it's the how that's impossible.
Modern horses train specifically for the Belmont distance. They have pacing strategies designed by computers. They're on customized nutrition plans, and they all hit the same wall that every distance athlete hits: fatigue. Secretariat didn't hit the wall. The wall got out of his way. Okay, let's get a little nerdy for a second, because this record might actually be the most objective proof of Secretariat's dominance. Timeform is basically the ultimate horse rating system. Think of it like a credit score for racehorses, except way more sophisticated. It takes into account every race, every condition, every competition level, the quality of opponents, track conditions, everything. It's the gold standard for comparing horses across different eras. Secretariat earned a 139 rating, which was the highest ever given to a North American racehorse at the time. To put that in perspective, American Pharaoh, who won the Triple Crown in 2015, got a 126. Justify, another recent Triple Crown winner, got a 128. Cigar, one of the greatest horses of the 90s, maxed out at 130. That 9-point gap between Secretariat and the next closest horse is like the difference between a professional athlete and a Hall of Famer. In statistical terms, it's massive. We're talking about a horse that was rated nearly 10 points higher than modern champions who had access to better nutrition, better training methods, better veterinary care, better track surfaces. Everything. The only horses that have achieved higher timeform ratings are international horses like Frankel, who had a 143, but he raced as a 4-year-old. As a 3-year-old competing in America, Secretariat remains untouchable. Now, let me explain why timeform ratings matter and why this isn't just some arbitrary number. Timeform was founded in the UK in the 1940s by a guy named Phil Bull, who was essentially a mathematical genius obsessed with horse racing. He developed a system that could compare horses across different eras, different tracks, different conditions. It's become the industry standard because it's ruthlessly objective. The rating takes into account the quality of the field you beat, the distance you beat them by, the speed of the race, the track conditions, everything. You can't game the system. You can't luck into a high rating. You have to earn it by beating quality competition convincingly. Secretariat's 139 wasn't based on one good race. It was based on a body of work that included demolishing fields in the Triple Crown, beating older horses, setting track records, and doing it all with margins of victory that were statistically off the charts. Here's another way to think about it. Timeform ratings follow a bell curve, like most rating systems. Most good horses fall between 115 to 125. Great horses hit 125 to 135. To get above 135, you have to be historically elite. To hit 139 as a 3-year-old, that's "we may never see this again" territory. Modern rating systems have evolved. There's buyer speed figures, racing post ratings, others, but they all tell the same story. Secretariat sits at the top, and the gap between him and second place is bigger than the gap between second place and 10th place. That's not just dominance, that's a different species. The Kentucky Derby, the most famous 2 minutes in sports, the Run for the Roses, the race that stops a nation. Except when Secretariat ran it in 1973, it wasn't 2 minutes. It was 1 minute and 59 2/5 seconds. He's still the only horse to ever break the 2-minute mark at Churchill Downs. Let that sink in. In 52 years, with every advance in training, breeding, and equine science, no one has run the Kentucky Derby in under 2 minutes, except Secretariat. And here's what makes it even crazier. He was dead last out of the gate. Last! Out of 13 horses. By the time they hit the first turn, he was so far back that the jockey, Ron Turcotte, just let him run his own race. Turcotte later said he wasn't worried because he could feel the power underneath him. Then, Secretariat did something that should be physically impossible. He ran each quarter mile faster than the previous one, and his final quarter was the fastest of any horse in the entire race. He went from last place to first place while accelerating. That's not how racing works. That's not how fatigue works. But somehow, that's what happened. The Derby is called the most exciting 2 minutes in sports for a reason, but Secretariat proved that sometimes greatness doesn't even need those full 2 minutes. Let me give you the full story of this race because it's absolutely wild. It was May 5th, 1973, Churchill Downs. The 99th running of the Kentucky Derby. Secretariat was the favorite, but he'd had a rough start to his 3-year-old season. He'd lost a couple of races, and some people were wondering if he was overrated. The gates opened, and immediately everything went wrong. Secretariat stumbled slightly at the brake, which cost him position. By the time the field hit the first turn, he was dead last. The CBS broadcast shows him trailing the entire field by multiple lengths. Ron Turkett made a decision in that moment that would define both their legacies. Instead of panicking and rushing to catch up, which would have burned out Secretariat's energy reserves, he just sat quiet. He let Secretariat find his rhythm. He trusted the horse. And Secretariat started moving through the field like a freight train, not frantically, not desperately, smoothly, efficiently, almost casually. He picked off horse after horse on the backstretch. By the time they hit the far turn, he was in the middle of the pack. Then, on the final turn, Turkett gave him just a tiny bit of rein. That's all it took. Secretariat exploded. He blew past the leaders and just kept going. By the time they hit the stretch, the race was over. Chick Anderson's call is iconic. Secretariat is moving on the outside. He's moving to the leaders. The excitement in his voice builds as Secretariat makes his move. Then, down the stretch, Secretariat has taken the lead, and he's pulling away. When the official time was posted, 1:59 and 2/5, the crowd went absolutely insane. The 2-minute barrier had been broken. It was like Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. People thought it might never happen. And here's the thing. In the 50-plus years since, with all the attempts to break that record, no one has even come close. The second fastest Kentucky Derby time is 1:59.4 by Monarchos in 2001, basically a dead heat with Secretariat's time. After that, the times drop off significantly. Think about what that means. Modern horses train on synthetic surfaces designed for speed. They have Olympic-level conditioning programs. They're bred specifically for the Derby distance. And after thousands of attempts over 5 decades, exactly one horse has matched Secretariat's time, and none have beaten it. The Kentucky Derby isn't just about speed. It's about managing a chaotic 20-horse field, navigating traffic, finding the right position, and then having enough left in the tank to finish. Secretariat did all of that while starting from last place and still ran the fastest time in history. That's not just a record, that's a masterclass. Here's something most people don't know about Secretariat. He didn't just dominate on dirt tracks, he could run on anything. See, in horse racing, there's dirt racing and turf racing, and they're completely different. It's like the difference between playing basketball and playing hockey. Different footing, different strategy, different muscle movements, and different biomechanics. The best dirt horses often struggle on turf, and vice versa. Modern horses usually specialize in one or the other. You're either a dirt horse or a turf horse. Trainers pick a lane and stick with it because that's how you maximize performance. Secretariat won the Triple Crown on dirt, 3 of the most prestigious races in American horse racing, all on dirt surfaces. Then later that year, in October 1973, he went up to Canada and won the Canadian International Championship on turf. Not just won it, he set a course record of 2:24 and 4/5 for 1.5 miles on grass. He's the only horse to ever win Triple Crown races and a major turf stakes in the same year. It would be like an NFL player winning the Super Bowl, then switching to soccer and winning a championship. It just doesn't happen. The skill sets are too different. But Secretariat wasn't bound by the same rules as other horses. Let me explain why this is so insane from a technical perspective. When horses run on dirt, they dig in with each stride. Their hooves sink into the surface and they push off with force. It requires power, strength, the ability to handle resistance with every step. Dirt racing favors horses with big, powerful strides and explosive speed. Turf racing is completely different. Grass is firmer, slicker, less forgiving. Horses need lighter, quicker strides. The biomechanics are more about balance and agility than raw power. It's like the difference between a linebacker and a wide receiver. Both elite athletes, but completely different skill sets. Most modern champions pick one surface and stick with it. California Chrome was brilliant on dirt, but struggled on turf. Enable was one of the greatest turf horses ever, but never raced on dirt. It's just too risky to cross over. Different training, different shoeing, different racing strategy. But in 1973, Secretariat's owner, Penny Chenery, and trainer, Lucien Lauren, had a different philosophy. They believed they had a once-in-a-lifetime horse, and they wanted to test him against the best competition in the world, regardless of surface. The Canadian International at Woodbine was one of the most prestigious turf races in North America. The field included international horses that had been training on turf their entire lives. These weren't horses trying a new surface. This was their specialty. Secretariat showed up having barely trained on grass. He'd had maybe a couple of workouts on turf to get used to the feel. That's it. Race day came, and Secretariat did what Secretariat did. He took control of the race, set honest fractions, and pulled away down the stretch. He won by 6.5 lengths and set a course record that stood for years. The crazy part? He could have been even more dominant on turf if they'd focused on it. After that race, multiple European trainers said they believed Secretariat could have won the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, basically the Super Bowl of turf racing, if they'd brought him over. But they didn't need to prove anything else. Secretariat had already shown he could dominate on any surface, under any conditions, against any competition. That versatility is a record that will likely never be broken, because modern racing doesn't work that way anymore. Horses are too specialized, the stakes are too high, and the risk of injury switching surfaces is too great. Secretariat did it because he could do anything. All right, this one gets wild. This is where we start understanding that Secretariat wasn't just trained better or bred better. He was literally built different. When Secretariat died in 1989 from laminitis, veterinarian Dr. Thomas Swerbchuk performed a necropsy, basically an autopsy for animals, and he found something absolutely insane. Secretariat's heart weighed between 21 and 22 pounds. The average thoroughbred heart weighs about 8.5 pounds. His heart was almost 3 times the normal size. Think about what that means. Your heart is your engine. It pumps blood, delivers oxygen, removes waste, powers everything. Secretariat's engine was literally triple the size. It's like comparing a regular car engine to a massive supercharged V8. He could pump more blood, deliver more oxygen to his muscles, and sustain higher speeds for longer periods. It's a genetic mutation called the X factor gene, passed down through the female line. Secretariat inherited it from his dam, something royal. The gene causes an enlarged heart, and it's incredibly rare. He wasn't just talented, he was biologically superior. And that gene, it's still being tracked in his descendants today, which is why his bloodline is so valuable in breeding. People are literally trying to recreate that genetic advantage because they know it was the secret to his dominance. Dr. Swerbchuk later said that Secretariat's heart was the largest he had ever seen in any horse, and he'd examined thousands of thoroughbreds over his career. It wasn't just big, It was perfect. No defects, no problems, just pure power. Now, let me tell you the full story of how we even know about this heart, because it's fascinating. Dr. Swarchek was a professor at the University of Kentucky's veterinary school. He'd performed thousands of necropsies on horses over his career. When Secretariat was euthanized in 1989 due to incurable laminitis, basically a devastating hoof condition, Swarchek was called in to do the necropsy. He knew he was examining a legend, but even he wasn't prepared for what he found. When he opened up Secretariat's chest cavity, he literally stopped and stared. The heart was so massive, it didn't look real. He called over his assistants to confirm what he was seeing. They waited twice to make sure the scale wasn't broken. 22 pounds.
For context, the largest normal thoroughbred heart Swarchek had ever seen was maybe 9 or 10 pounds. Secretariat's was more than double that. But here's what makes it even more incredible. It wasn't just big, it was perfectly formed. No defects, no abnormalities, no weaknesses. Just a massive, perfectly functioning biological pump. Swarchek said in interviews later that he'd examined thousands of horses, including other champions, other racehorses, other elite athletes. Nothing came close. Eclipse, one of the greatest racehorses of the 18th century, reportedly had a 14-pound heart. Farlap, the legendary Australian horse, had a 13.7-pound heart. Both of those were considered extraordinary. Secretariat's was 8 pounds heavier than Farlap's. The X-factor gene that caused this is one of the most studied genetic traits in thoroughbred breeding. It's carried on the X chromosome, which means it passes from mother to son. If a mare carries the gene, her male offspring have a 50-50 chance of getting the enlarged heart. Secretariat's dam, Something Royal, was a carrier. She passed it to Secretariat, and Secretariat, being a male, couldn't pass it on directly, but his daughters could carry it, and their sons could inherit it. Breeding farms have been tracking this gene for decades, trying to replicate what Secretariat had. They've had some success. There have been other horses with enlarged hearts, but none have had the complete package that Secretariat had: the heart, the stride, the biomechanics, the will to win. Here's the thing that blows my mind. Secretariat didn't know he had this advantage. He didn't know he was biologically superior. He just ran. And his body, this perfectly engineered biological machine, let him run faster and longer than any horse before or since. It's like if you found out Usain Bolt had lungs twice the size of normal humans, or Michael Jordan had a heart that pumped 50% more blood. Secretariat wasn't just gifted, he was a genetic lottery win that may never happen again.
You know how we talked about that massive heart? Well, it powered something else incredible: his stride. When Secretariat was in full flight, his stride length was measured between 24 and 25 feet. Let me give you some context for that. That's the length of a large pickup truck, or about 2/3 the length of a school bus. Most thoroughbreds have a stride of about 20 to 22 feet. That extra 3 to 5 feet doesn't sound like much, but over the course of a mile and a half, it means Secretariat was taking hundreds fewer strides than every other horse. He was covering more ground with less effort. It's pure efficiency. Here's the really fascinating part. American Pharaoh, one of the closest modern comparisons, actually had a slightly longer stride, about 26 feet, but he still couldn't match Secretariat's times. Why? Because stride length isn't everything. It's about how you use that stride. Biomechanics experts have studied the footage frame by frame, and they discovered something remarkable. Secretariat had what's called a double suspension transverse gallop. Most horses have one moment of suspension per stride, when all 4 feet leave the ground. Secretariat had 2 moments of suspension. His legs were suspended mid-stride twice per full stride cycle. This is incredibly rare. Man o' War had it, Farlap had it, John Henry had it. These are some of the greatest horses in history, and they all shared this unique biomechanical trait. Combined with his nearly perfect conformation, straight hocks, powerful hindquarters, balanced proportions, Secretariat's stride was the picture of efficiency. Maximum power with minimum energy waste. One biomechanics expert described watching footage of Secretariat run as like watching a perfectly engineered machine. Every movement had purpose. Every stride was optimized. There was no wasted motion. Combine that massive heart pumping tons of oxygen with that enormous, efficient stride, and you get a horse that was basically a perfectly engineered racing machine that evolution took millions of years to create, and somehow all ended up in one chestnut colt in 1970. But let's dig deeper into the biomechanics, because this is where it gets really nerdy and really cool. Dr. George Pratt from MIT conducted a study on Secretariat in the 1970s. He used high-speed cameras and motion capture, cutting-edge technology at the time, to analyze every aspect of Secretariat's stride. What he found was remarkable. Secretariat's stride wasn't just long, it was perfectly balanced. The ratio between his front leg extension and his hind leg drive was ideal. Most horses have inefficiencies. Maybe their front legs reach too far or their hind legs don't provide enough power. Secretariat was perfectly calibrated. His shoulder angle was nearly perfect, about 45 degrees, which is considered optimal for speed. His hindquarters were massive and powerful, providing explosive drive. And his back, this is crucial, was short and strong, which allowed him to transfer power efficiently from his hindquarters through his body. Think of it like a car. You can have a powerful engine, the heart, but if your transmission is inefficient or your wheels aren't aligned, you're losing power. Secretariat's entire body was perfectly aligned to convert that massive cardiovascular power into forward motion. There's also something called overstride, the distance that a horse's rear hoof lands in front of where the front hoof was. Most good horses overstride by maybe 6 to 12 inches. Secretariat regularly overstrided by 18 to 24 inches. His rear legs were driving him so far forward that they were landing nearly 2 feet ahead of where his front legs had just been. When you watch footage of Secretariat run, really watch it in slow motion, you can see this. His body extends like a rubber band being stretched, then contracts with incredible power, then extends again. It's rhythmic, efficient, beautiful. Modern horses have been bred for generations to try to replicate this. Breeding programs analyze everything: shoulder angles, hip width, cannon bone length, all of it. They use computer modeling to predict which matings will produce optimal biomechanics, and yet they haven't produced another Secretariat. Because here's the thing, you can breed for individual traits. You can get a horse with a big heart. You can get a horse with a long stride. You can get a horse with good conformation. But getting all of it perfectly aligned in one animal, that's not breeding. That's luck. That's lightning in a bottle. Secretariat was the biological equivalent of rolling a natural 20 on every single genetic trait that matters for racing. The odds of it happening once were astronomical. The odds of it happening again? We're still waiting. And here's number 1, the record that makes even experienced trainers shake their heads in disbelief. The record that defies everything we know about mammalian physiology. The record that proves Secretariat was something we may never see again. In that legendary 1973 Belmont Stakes, Secretariat ran each quarter mile faster than the one before. Let me break this down with the actual splits. First quarter, 23 3/5 seconds. Second quarter, 24 2/5 seconds. Half mile, 46 1/5 seconds. 3 quarters, 109 4/5. 1 mile, 134 1/5.
1¼ miles, 1:59, faster than his Kentucky Derby record. Final time, 2:24. Look at that progression. He sped up as the race went on. His final quarter was run in 25 seconds, still moving like a freight train after running nearly a half mile. This is physically impossible. When horses run, they burn through their energy reserves. ATP gets depleted, lactic acid builds up, muscles fatigue, and oxygen debt increases. Every horse in history follows this pattern. They have to slow down in the final stages of a long race. It's basic biology. It's the law of diminishing returns. Except this one. Secretariat somehow found another gear when he should have been shutting down. The horse was accelerating at the end of a marathon race. In track and field terms, this is called negative splits, and it's considered the holy grail of distance running. If a human runner runs the second half of a race faster than the first half, they're considered exceptional. Secretariat did it for quarter mile after quarter mile after quarter mile. Scientists still can't fully explain it. That combination of the massive heart, the perfect stride, the unique biomechanics, and whatever else was going on in his system created something that broke the rules of physiology. Dr. George Pratt from MIT studied Secretariat stride mechanics in the 1970s and said he'd never seen anything like it. The horse was able to maintain power output at distances where other horses were dying. It wasn't stamina in the traditional sense. It was like he had a reserve tank that activated when other horses hit empty. And that's why 52 years later, we're still talking about him. That's why every modern breeding program tries to capture even a fraction of what he had. That's why his records still stand, while training techniques have advanced, nutrition has improved, and tracks have gotten faster. Some things in nature are just perfect, just unrepeatable, just once in a lifetime. Secretariat was all of those things. Now, let me explain why this is impossible, because understanding the biology makes it even more mind-blowing. When mammals, humans, horses, any of us, run at high intensity, we use what's called aerobic metabolism at first. Our cardiovascular system delivers oxygen to our muscles, and that oxygen helps convert stored energy, glycogen, into usable fuel, ATP. This is efficient, and as long as we're getting enough oxygen, we can maintain this. But when we push into high-intensity effort, like sprinting, or in a horse's case, running at race pace, we start to exceed our cardiovascular system's ability to deliver enough oxygen. So our muscles switch to anaerobic metabolism, producing energy without oxygen. The problem? Anaerobic metabolism produces lactic acid as a byproduct. Lactic acid builds up in the muscles, causes that burning sensation, and eventually leads to fatigue. You have to slow down. It's not a choice, it's chemistry. In a race like the Belmont, 1½ miles at full speed, horses start accumulating lactic acid by the half-mile mark. By the mile mark, it's building up significantly. By the final quarter, every horse is in oxygen debt, swimming in lactic acid and desperately trying to just maintain pace. Every horse, except Secretariat. Somehow, his cardiovascular system, that massive 22-pound heart, those perfectly efficient lungs, that optimized circulatory system, was able to deliver enough oxygen to keep his muscles working aerobically when every other horse had shifted to anaerobic. Or maybe, and this is where it gets speculative because scientists genuinely don't know, his muscles were able to clear lactic acid faster than they accumulated it. Maybe his genetic makeup included some other mutation that gave him superhuman, super horse, lactate threshold. Whatever the mechanism, the result was the same. While every other horse was dying in the final quarter mile, Secretariat was accelerating. Think about what that means from a competitive standpoint.
In a normal race, horses are all dealing with the same physiological constraints. They're all running out of gas at roughly the same rate. So the race becomes about who managed their energy best, who positioned themselves well, who has a little bit more left than the others. But when one horse isn't dealing with those constraints, when one horse is actually gaining strength while everyone else is fading, it's not a competition anymore. It's an exhibition. That's what the Belmont was. Secretariat wasn't racing against other horses. He was racing against the limits of what was thought to be biologically possible. And he won. Modern training programs have tried everything to replicate this. High-altitude training to increase red blood cell count, carefully calibrated interval training to push lactate threshold, nutritional programs designed to maximize glycogen storage and fat-burning efficiency. And you know what? Modern horses are better trained than horses of the 1970s. They have every advantage. And still, none of them can run negative splits in a 1.5-mile race. Because you can't train your way into having a heart 3 times the normal size. You can't train your way into having perfect biomechanical efficiency. You can't train your way into being able to clear lactic acid at superhuman rates. Secretariat had all of that, and that's why this record, B's negative splits, this impossible acceleration, this defiance of basic physiology, sits at number 1 on this list. It's not just a record, it's proof that sometimes nature creates something that transcends the normal rules, something that makes us question what we thought was possible. And maybe, just maybe, Secretariat was a one-time glitch in evolution, a perfect storm of genetic factors that aligned in one horse, in one moment in time, and may never align that way again. 52 years of trying to recreate it suggests that might be exactly what he was. 10 records, 52 years, and counting. Secretariat wasn't just a great racehorse, he was a genetic lottery ticket that came up all jackpots at once. The massive heart, the perfect stride, the impossible stamina, and the unique biomechanics. Every once in a while, nature just decides to show off and create something that breaks all the rules. And maybe that's why we're still chasing these records half a century later. We're trying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. We're trying to recreate something that might have been a once-in-species occurrence. Modern horses are faster than ever, except when compared to Secretariat. Breeding programs are more sophisticated than ever, except they can't recreate Secretariat. Training methods are more advanced than ever, except they haven't produced another Secretariat. Maybe we never will. Maybe that's okay. Maybe part of what makes greatness so special is that it's unrepeatable, that it stands alone, untouched, as a testament to what's possible when everything aligns perfectly. Think about this. We've had 3 Triple Crown winners since Secretariat: American Pharoah in 2015, Justify in 2018, and most recently in the 2020s. All 3 were incredible horses, all 3 were champions, and none of them broke a single one of Secretariat's records. American Pharoah come the closest. His Belmont time was 2:26.65, more than 2 seconds slower. His time form rating was 126, 13 points lower. He won the Belmont by 5.5 lengths. Impressive, but nowhere near 31. Justify won the Triple Crown without losing a race. He was undefeated, and his times were all slower than Secretariat's. These aren't bad horses. They're generational talents. They're horses that come along once every few decades, and Secretariat's records still stood after they ran. That tells you everything you need to know. There's a quote from Ron Turcotte, Secretariat's jockey, that I think captures it perfectly. Years after he retired, someone asked him if he thought we'd ever see another horse like Secretariat, and Turcotte said, "I don't think so. I think he was one of God's horses. He came along to show us what a perfect racehorse could be, and then he took him back."
Whether you believe that or not, there's something profound in it. Because Secretariat wasn't just better than other horses, he was operating on a different level entirely. A level we can measure and document and analyze, but can't fully explain and definitely can't recreate. Maybe that's the real record. Not the times, not the margins, not the statistics. The real record is that one horse showed us what perfect looks like. And 52 years later, perfect is still untouched. Secretariat ran like he knew he was racing for history. And 52 years later, history is still trying to catch up.